Welcome to RH Fisheries Monument 1. We're at the back end of February now, so this session isn't going to be about catching loads and loads of fish. It's going to be about how I approach this venue, the back end of the winter, and what tactics I approach when I come to this fishery. Now, the weather is really grim. It's windy, it's wet, so the majority of this filming might be bivvy bound. However, that's not going to put us off. We're going to try and catch a couple of fish and put them on the bank for you and show you exactly how I target this venue. Well, we've finally managed to get the rods out and it's time to talk to you which swim I've chosen. So I've chose Peg 12 on Monument 1. It's a swim that I have fished previously in the past and it's been very kind to me. The good thing about this fishery is you have to book your peg in advance, so there's no rushing around, driving like a bad man, trying to get the best swim or whatever. You know exactly what peg you're booked on when you arrive. So for me, this peg's done a lot of bites for me in the past. And the other good thing is I've checked on social media because RH Fisheries do keep a really up-to-date social media page. And it's a massive edge to tell you which pegs are doing fish. And Peg 12, luckily, has done fish at the weekend as well. So out there's a couple of spots that I know from previous sessions where I've caught before. There's not a lot out there in terms of features or anything to find. It's just a couple of spots which have produced in the past, and that's where I've started on this session. So I'm edging my bets there. If nothing materialises or something shows itself, I'll react accordingly. But up until that point, I'm just happy to sit on my hands on spots that I know have done bites in the past, and we'll see what happens. Another thing to mention is now we've got the rods in, when I arrive at RH Fisheries on Monument, either Monument 1 or Monument 2, ideally I always want to be one of the first guys out of the blocks in terms of getting my rods out. The very pressured lakes, them fish know what marker float is, what a 𝘁𝗵𝗀𝗀 is, and when everyone turns up at the same time and starts crashing leads in or crashing bait over the top of the reds, I want my bags already in there before that actually starts, so that everything's starting to get weathered, the bait's starting to go out there, and everything's starting to look more natural and a lot more appealing to the carp. Plus with the disturbance then the fish are just going to bounce from peg to peg to peg to peg, and if everything's nice and slack, out the way, everything's already settled, they're more likely to come into your area. We've had a couple of liners already. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it'll be kind to us on this session as well. We're into our first fish. I've been expecting this rod to go at any point, to be honest with you. We've been getting liner after liner. The guy opposite's managed to catch one. The guy next to me's managed to catch one. And yeah, hopefully, this is my turn. Yeah, the bobbin's just literally slammed to the top. Slowly started to tick off the clutch. And the good thing is in here, you never know what you're gonna hook either. There's so many big fish in here. Every one you hook's a little bit nerve-wracking. Oh, it's nice to get some action anyway. The end of February now. It's nice to be playing a carp. That bag's been in position for, well, 6 or 7 hours now. Just goes to show the effectiveness of them. You can leave them, you know, redoing a fresh bag sometimes helps, or I've left them up to sort of 24, 36 hours before and still got bites on them, so they are a very, very attractive way of fishing. It's still maggot season on here at the minute, so when we get around to talking about what I've actually put inside the bag, I've got a few maggots in there, just because you don't go against the grain. This sees a lot of maggot from November onwards. So it'd be silly not to have any in the mix. A few pellets, bit of crushed pellet, nice little bright visual hook bait, and a little bit of fruit smart liquid in there for good measure. The yellow seems to be, I don't know what it is, any lakes that's got blue dye or yellow seems to be a really good colour. And that fruit smart liquid, with it being yellow, just complements that little yellow hook bait really well. Oh, he's a nice common look. He's not a massive fish, but he'll do for a start. I think there's some rain due in the next hour, So it'd be nice to get this one in, get the bag back out, the photos done. Oh, just round that reeds and then we'll be set for the rain coming in. Whee. There we go. We're off the mark. Let's have a look what we got. Yeah, he'll be £20. Lovely clean fish. Well, have a look at him. He's almost as deep as he's long. £22.5. It's a nice way to start the session. That rod, as I've previously mentioned, has had 2 or 3 liners on it today, real savage liners. And I knew it was probably only a matter of time. I was in the right zone. The gentleman opposite's had one. The guy to my right hand side had one. And this rod was well in amongst them. So yeah, it's a great start. It's nowhere near the biggest fish in the lake, but it'll definitely do. We're on the right track, and it's easier to build on top of one fish and make it into 2 than it is on no fish and turn it into 1. So hopefully it's a sign of things to come. It's very, very early in the session. We've still got 3 or 4 hours of light left today, and then we're going into the night. So let's see what that brings. Well, as you can see, we're finally bivvy bound. The rain's finally setting, and it looks like it's here for the duration of the night. We've just slipped that lovely 𝘃𝗵𝗶𝗀, so that was a nice surprise, really early bite into the session. But it's worth mentioning that before we did any stills or anything with that fish, I quickly wrapped the rod up again, put a new lead on, new rig, fresh bag, and got it back out onto the exact same spot. These fish in here are very much shoal fish, especially this time of year as well. If you're getting liners and you've had a bite, the chances are there's maybe more than that one there. So the fish was safe and secured, letting it have a rest, get its breath back. Got some lovely footage of that one to show you as well afterwards. But all that time, the rod's back in the water working for you again, which can be a massive advantage in the difference between catching 1 fish or maybe 2. So I'll go into more detail about exactly how I'm tying my bags and what I'm putting in them a little bit later on, perhaps tomorrow morning now, when we're not bivvy bound and this rain's passed. So fingers crossed for tonight. I might have another carp or 2 to show you. Oh, well, good morning. It's about 2:30 in the morning. It's absolutely Baltic, and this one's just rattled off. It's exactly the same rod as before. Bag had been in position probably 8 or 10 hours. I had a savage liner on it an hour and a half before that, around about midnight, and yeah, it's a stunning carp. Really made up with it. Like I said, it's that same rod again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip this one back and make sure I get that rod bang in the same position as before, because there's clearly a shoal of fish out there, and maybe even one bigger will come along. Mega. Well, it's morning now, and the weather looks amazing, to be honest with you. Like, proper different contrast from yesterday. It was overcast, it was throwing it down, it was windy. Today the wind's done a 180, it's coming down this end of the lake, the sun's out, it's really good for a bite. And these lakes are notorious with a 36-hour rule that the second day, fingers crossed, is usually better than the first day. And obviously we've had 2 bites already, so I'm hoping there might be one more bite in it before we leave this afternoon. But I'm going to talk you through the tactics. So this is a rig that I've been using. So what I've got here is, I've got a section of rock bottom tungsten tubing. The fishery rules state, you know, no lead core or anything like that. Tubing's absolutely fine, or naked's fine. I just prefer tubing these days. I visit a lot of day ticket venues, and the rules stipulate now that the majority of them that you must use tubing. So it's just an easy fix for me, just to keep it on all the time. I've got this lead set so it actually drops off. Now, for the people that's been to the monument before, I'm going to hold my hands up. There's absolutely no reason in terms of weed, snags or anything like that why you shouldn't keep the lead on. If you want to keep the lead on, absolutely fine. Me personally, when I'm fishing for, you know, there's potentially a couple of 50-pounders, there's stacks of 40s and literally getting on for 130-pounders, I'd rather just have that lead out of the way. It's just a personal thing. Like I said, it won't hinder if you keep it on. It's more my OCD that for this type of fishing, I just want to get rid of that lead really. So I've got that set up. I've got a little tail rubber on top of the little insert of the lead, line wrapped around the outside and tied to the wrong end of the swivel. And then actually on the ring of the size 8 ring swivel, I've got a little maybe 4.5 inch braided section. So that's 25-pound silk flex braid. I've just done a figure of 8 loop there and loop to loop that rig on. I've got a nice size 4 curve, so a big hook. These are big fish, you know, everything I hook I want to be landing, because you never know what your next bite's going to be. And I've basically got that slip D style. I've chopped and changed between rigs over the years. Some have been good, some have been bad. The sort of fish hook to land fish ratio has not been good, but with this one, it's as perfect as what I can probably get it. The hook holds are savage. I lose very, very few fish. Well, touch wood, you watch the next one up now, but I'll lose very, very few fish. And all I've done there is I've made sure that D is sort of opposite the barb, or as close to the eye of that hook as possible. The further around the shank you go with that D, what you'll find is if you pick it up with a hook bait on, that hook will be dropping at different angles, and you don't want that. You want it pointing down. So as soon as the fish sucks it up, that point's facing down, ready to catch the bottom lip. And I've just got one of the Ridge Monkey long kickers on there. Again, you could use shrink tube. For me, for this style of fishing where I'm hopefully getting a bite, 2, 3 maybe a session, I don't really want to be steaming rigs. I want to be able to get that rig out as quick and as humanly as possible. And without having to boil the kettle and steam shrink tube, this provides that for me. And again, that all important hook bait, so that's a peppered peach pastel barrel wafter from Mainline. This, I mean, yellows is a classic colour. For me, these hook baits over the last 2 years have probably accounted for 95% of my captures. I used to be a massive fan of orange. Pink's a really good colour, and white, and I've gone through the full range, but the one that stuck with me now over the last couple of years, and one that I know if I cast out I'm probably going to get a bite, is the peppered peach. Now, whether that's to do with the colour, the smell, or whether it's just the out and out confidence I've got in it, who knows. But that's the rig and the hook bait at the minute that's been doing me a lot of fish, and that's caught me those 2 lovely carp so far in this session. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you exactly how I've been loading the bag. Now, solid bags play a huge part in my angling throughout all the year. In fact, I'd probably go as far as to say 90% of my angling is based around it, and the only time I change that is if I'm fishing at extreme long distance, so 120 plus, or there's a lot of nuisance fish, i.e. bream and tench, that are either destroying the bag or picking up and playing with it, or I'm getting loads of bites off of them, which obviously I don't want. So they're the only 2 occasions where I'll change these days. I've got so much confidence in them, and for the last 3 or 4 years they've literally changed my angling. I've got that. I guess it goes back to that confidence thing. Whatever you are confident in, you can chuck something out there in the exact same area and have different rigs on different rods, and 9 times out of 10 the one you're confident in will go. It's just that thing for me, and I don't see the point in changing it, and I don't fix something if it's not broken. So right, on the Monument 1, I like to use single bags to start with. Obviously, if I'm getting loads of bite, I've got no problem with introducing bait, but to start with, the great bite tactic, get one under your belt and you can build it from there. On this session, I have been using maggots and casters. So the Monument have a rule, I think it's from November to March, the 1st of March. So we're just luckily within that, you're allowed to use maggots. So you're in maggot season. So ordinarily, I'd just be filling this bag with pellets and maybe liquids, etc., etc. So I'd still be using them here, but I am going to be adding in maggots. They've been used like religiously since November, so the fish are probably now switched on to them. So although I'm maybe not putting gallons and gallons or even pint and pints out, having a few out there isn't going to do you any harm, and having that little bit of visual on the bottom and maybe some that are moving, that may be the difference between catching a fish and not catching a fish. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a solid bag. I tend to stick to the small size solid bags. You'll actually be shocked when you drop one in the edge how much bait a small solid bag actually has. You think it's just a mouthful, it's not. It's actually 2 or 3 mouthfuls there. There's actually quite a bit of bait. So what I always do is I blow air into it, and I'll get some powder or ground bait or whatever you want to use, and I'll fill the bottom of that bag. Don't need a lot. I know a lot of people like to use pellets or whatever else you want to put in the bag at the bottom, but for me, that bit of ground bait serves 2 or 3 different purposes. So number one, if there's any moisture on your rig or on your lead, it's not going to melt the bottom of that PVA bag. Number two, again, it gives your bag another different version of attraction out there. So that ground bait, when it's dry, if you imagine that's going to open up on the lake bottom, with it being dry, some of it's going to rise to the top, some of it's going to fall away, and some of it's just going to drift away. But again, you're working all those different water columns. And thirdly, for me, when it comes to pushing in the corners and lick and sticking, by using the ground bait, you can really get into the corners and pull them over, whereas pellets sometimes leave little air pockets, and it's a little bit fiddly to sort of lick and stick your bag. So we'll start with ground bait. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot. Another little tip I'll do before that, I'll just drop that rig, all of it, lead and everything, tubing, in the ground bait before I put it in the bag. That's just going to cling to any remaining moisture. So again, at this point, it's no more difficult than that. I'll just drop the lot in. You see a lot of people trying to put the hook bait in the corners or nicking it in the bag, or even the lead at the back and the hook bait on top. Again, it just comes down to personal preference. For me, when that bag's out there and, you know, the tow or nuisance fish or carp or whatever are moving about, that pellet and that bag's going to be dispersed a little bit anyway, and naturally that wafter's going to try and work its way to the top and sit where it wants to, regardless of how you've placed it. So there's no right or wrong way of doing it. They're all brilliant ways. This is just my way of doing it. It makes it absolutely simple. If I was getting hook pulls or I thought that it was hindering me, then yeah, I would change it. But for me, there's absolutely no reason to. So I'll drop it in there. What I'll do then is I'll get a nice pinch of pellet, and again, not a lot, maybe an inch and a half in there. And what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to lift that lead out and just tap it down just to compress those pellets, and then lay my lead on top. Okay, so what we've got there is now you've got a layer of ground bait and a layer of pellets. What that's done is it's protected that hook bait and that hook point. So now when I'm going to introduce the maggots and casters, nothing's going to impale on that hook point. Sometimes what you'll find is when the maggots wriggle about, or if that hook's sitting proud when you've cast out or whatever, that a maggot can nick it, and obviously that's going to hinder, you know, how you're going to hook the carp, or if you're going to hook the carp at all when it's done that. So for me, that's sandwiched in between there right now. I know I can add whatever I want to this bag now, and that hook is going to be sitting proud no matter what happens out there now. Again, we're using maggots on the, so this third stage now, if I was using pellets, I'd just continue to fill this bag up with pellets, no problem. Obviously, I'm going to be introducing some naturals into this. Now, before I get started with it, the main thing you've got to consider is they're fine going in the bags dry, not a problem. But certainly casters, you're not going to be able to compact this bag as tightly as what you're going to do with pellets. Now, fortunately on here, we're not casting any more than 15, 16 wraps at the furthest, so it's not going to hinder your casting capabilities. If you wanted to go extreme range, you're going to have to take the maggots out and really get that bag aerodynamics as compact as possible. But with this, you're going to see in a minute, if the casters are so delicate when they're in there and they're squashed up with the pellets and the lead and everything else, you burst one, the bag's done. So you've got to be real careful. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to place that down. I'm just going to take, again, I'm not putting a lot in, you know, there's maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30 casters there. Now I'm keeping these casters in water, obviously, you know, to preserve them so they're not floating. I can't put them in like that. You could add salt to that water, which maybe would help them stop melting the PVA. But for me, the easiest way to do it is just get a towel. I'll pour them onto the towel from my very carpy bait box. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pat the casters, just get any moisture off of them or any of that water. Get them back on that bait tub lid. What I'm going to do then is they're pretty much dry now, and you possibly could get away with it. However, I'm going to take it one step further just to double make sure, because I know what I'm like. I'll put it together and it'll melt. I'm just going to sprinkle a bit of that ground bait or that crushed pellet, what I've been putting in the bottom of my bag. So I'm just going to mix it around in that ground bait. Again, you don't want to like massively cover them or anything like that. You just want a nice little sprinkle just to take off any of that remaining water that they've been sat in. So right, perfect. So what you do then is you go get your bag again. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to start filling the bag with the caster. Again, you're going to be taking some of that ground bait in, or that crushed pellet in with you when you're doing this, which again is absolutely fine. It's ideal really, because if one does burst, it might actually save you with having a bit of dry stuff around it. So that's the caster in there. That's the fiddly bit done. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. You could fill the rest of it up with pellets and be absolutely fine, but I want to add some maggots, and I chose red and white in this occasion. Again, the world's your oyster, use whatever colour you feel confident in. I just wanted a bit of visual down there. Another little tip I've done with these maggots is I've took some of the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗲 bait spray booster from Mainline, and the night before my session I've just given them 2 or 3 sprays and worked them around, and what you'll find is they'll actually absorb that liquid, and when you burst one the next morning it'll smell like 𝘃𝗃𝗱𝗲𝗲𝗲. It's a lovely smell, but it's just something a bit different. When they've seen maggots for, what is it now, 4 months, a maggot's a maggot to them. Yeah, they love them, yeah, they're attractive to them and they will eat them, but for me, if I can give mine a little bit more of an edge, something maybe I haven't seen before, maybe that'll get me those extra bites. So what I'm going to do, I'll take these maggots, I'm going to fill them up. Now, the biggest tip I can give you with solid bags is, number 1, don't fill them right to the top because there's no need, and number 2, so long as that lead is dead centre in that bag, so this is where you've got to take your time, and your tubing's coming straight out, or your mainline or whatever, it will fly right. If you don't get that lead bang in the centre, what you'll find is when you cast it, it'll either wobble in flight, or it just won't cast for you. So the main sort of thing you're looking for when you build your bags is make sure that lead's dead centre. I'm using a flat pair in this instance. I find them a little bit better to be able to tuck bait round, etc. You can use a square pair in line, and because they've got a bigger surface area, if you are struggling with like not getting your lead dead centre, with a square pair, when you cast, because it's bigger surface area, you're more likely to have got most of it in the middle, so you'll find that it will fly true. And when I'm going like extreme distance, sort of 120, maybe 110 yard plus, I'll always switch to a square. So right, I'm happy that that's dead centre. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pinch the top, turn it over, just give it a few taps. Again, I'm just going to give that a few taps. What you don't want to do with this, you can already see that that bag's starting to compress down. What you don't want to do with this is burst one of those casters. So at this point, I'd be tapping it, I'd be whacking it, I'd be really trying to get the bag as compact as possible. But because of the naturals, I can't go too mad. So once I've done a couple of taps, I'm going to pinch the top and twist. Again, I'm putting very, very little pressure on that bag. The minute you put any pressure on those casters, they're going to burst. So what I'm going to do now is just going to plus some PVA tape. And I find when I do this, if you hold the bag sort of upwards like I have, some hands at the bottom, it's going to be easier to wrap round. This is probably the most fiddliest bit, and the bit that people maybe struggle with the most. I know some people like to keep the tape on the spool and then do it, absolutely fine. You'll find your natural way of doing it, especially if you're new to bags. You will get your own way of doing it. So I'm just going to wrap it around 5 or 6 times, and once that part's done, you're fine. All you need to do then is just tie a couple of very complicated granny knots just to trap that in place. I'll take my scissors. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to trim off that excess PVA. Right, so that bag's, you know, like I said, it's not as tight as what I'd ever want a solid bag, but you've really got to be careful when you do this. I'm just going to fold that flap down. If you have got PVA that's got a lip on it like that, I like to just fold it down. Some of them have, some of them haven't. There's absolutely no problem with either. Now, At this point, people like to either pierce the bag or I'm not too keen on that. What I'll do is I'll actually just trim the corners off before I lick and stick and push them in. What that's going to do is when you push it in, some of the air is going to shoot out the other hole. And what that's going to mean is any remaining air pockets within the bag hopefully are going to disappear. And again, at this point, you're not going to be able to really push and compact it. So I'm just going to lick and stick one corner. This is why the ground bait's so good, because it just allows you to really pull over. I'm just trying my best not to not to break one of them casters. Otherwise you have to start again. So I've licked and sticked the bottom of it. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to get rid of that remaining PVA tape. Take your time doing this as well, because if you cut through your tail rubber or your tubing or your main line or whatever, you have to start again. Been there myself, it's an absolute nightmare, and all you'll do is you'll end up getting yourself worked up. So that is what's been happening. So that's the solid bag finished, as you can see. Fortunately, I've not managed to burst anything in there yet. That's a finished article, apart from I'm just going to add some liquid into that. Again, it's a personal choice, you don't have to. Another little tip, what I'd say is, yesterday obviously we had a lot of rain, so what I was doing yesterday is I would be either double bagging, or I would be adding something like hemp oil or some smart liquid. I'm using the fruit at the minute, a nice yellow colour, and just mixing it around the outside of the bag, so that when I go to cast, it gives me that little bit of extra time, maybe a few seconds, to be able to get that bag out there without the water, you know, and obviously the rain affecting the PVA. There's obviously no rain today, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make a little indent with a pair of scissors. Take some smart liquid, fruit smart liquid. That's my favourite for using in bags. I just like that yellow colour. Gives a real nice glow to the bottom of it. Just going to shake it up. So I'm going to put a little bit inside the bag, like so. And like I said, if it was raining, I'd be squirting this all along the outside. In fact, I'll show you. Get a little bit messy with it, just use my fingers, make sure all that PVA is nice and coated, even all the way around the tape that you've done. And then the last thing I'd do, drop it in the ground bait. So what you're going to have there is, when I've shut this up, just give it a second to take it on. What's that's going to happen is you're going to have a layer of ground bait and a layer of liquid for any moisture or any rain to attack before it melts the PVA. So it'll just give you that little bit of extra time to get everything sorted. So that is my finished bag. So like I said, it's not the most aerodynamic. It isn't as tight as what I'd probably like it, but needs must. And those little maggots and casters that are in there at this time of year, certainly on this venue where you're allowed them at the minute and they've seen a lot, can be a real edge. And this sort of approach has caught me literally hundreds of fish over the last few years, and I'm sure if you give it a go, it'll do the same for you. Oh, that's a bite, that's a bite. Well, we're into fish number 3. We've just been saying how good it looks. The weather really has taken a turn for the best. And it's the first bite on the left-hand rod. I actually just said there to Joe, I can't believe that left-hand rod's not gone. There's hardly any pressure there. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Like, and yeah, I must have talked myself into it, because straight away, the old bobbins hit the blank. And we're into another M1 fish. Hopefully this time it'll be what M1's famous for. Nice big fat 30-pound mirror. I said to Joe at the start, like, we'll be looking for one bite. This lake can be tricky in the summer, the best of times. Never mind in winter, and it's still late February. So to have 3 bites and the session's not over yet is just, I can't believe it's happened, to be honest. Hopefully we'll get this one in. And you never know, there might even be another one after. I know it sounds greedy, but greedy's good in carp fishing. We just finished doing a bit to camera where we've actually dropped one of the bags in the margin. I was saying on camera, you know, that wafter will sit pride, it'll sit pride regarding, we've done a little test in the margin, and yeah, like it's almost cruel. Almost like to the point of calling the RSPCA, it's that cruel. The wafter just settles down nicely on top of all that bag content, and yeah, brilliant winter tactic, especially when you don't want a lot of bait out there, you're looking for a bite at a time. It's a fantastic, and it is another one of them commons. Oh well. Hey. Oh, that's definitely a little bit bigger, mate. Little wafter hanging out. Oh, check him out, short and stocky. They're getting bigger. This one's £27. Yeah, it's the first bite on the left-hand rod. When I had that bite in the early hours of the morning, what I actually did was redid the left-hand rod. There's nobody actually in peg 11 to the left of me. I was a bit concerned with all the line pressure that the fish to drift into an area where there's no lines at all. So all I've done is I've moved my left-hand rod slightly further into peg 11's water, and yeah, this is the first bite on that rod. So they're getting bigger. Hopefully the next one will be that magic 30-pounder, which the Monument's famous for. But if they're not, 320s, end of February, who can grumble at that, eh? On a session, over the moon. Well, we are slowly but surely coming to the end of a very productive winter session. M1 can be a very tricky lake at the best of times, even in the summer. They've seen everything over the years, these fish, and it's by no means a walkover. If you'd have given 3 fish to me at the start of the session, I'd have snapped your hand off for it. You know, this was never going to be about clubbing them and winter hauling. This was going to be about looking for a bite in tricky conditions towards the back end of the winter, and I really feel like we've achieved that. So we've had 3 cracking fish, 3 20-pounders, and it just goes to show you the effectiveness of them solid bags. We haven't put a lot of bait in, but what we have done is fish nice and stealthy, fished where I believe the fish were, and yeah, those bags, I'm sure everything was to do with putting those bags in the right place, and if you do that 9 times out of 10, I'm sure you're going to catch a fish. So for now, it's time to get these rods in. I'm going to hit the road before the traffic starts. But yeah, it's been a wonderful session. I look forward to next time.